All right, well, welcome everyone. I'm Tom Miller with my teammate Lauren Waters. We are really excited to be here for our second session of five in this study, our leadership study, and our 30-day challenge of the 10 indicators of high-performing charter schools. So whether this is your first session with us or your 20th session with us, we're really excited and honored that you spend time with us talking about these very key principles and strategies to lead a high-performing school and become a strategic leader in the process. So I have loved, Lauren, I don't know if I've shared them all with you, but many people from last week, because they're getting the daily leadership challenge, and a lot of those, challenges like, hey, text me a picture or send me an email. And so it's been really great to hear some folks or, to see like some photos of your vision of where it is on the wall, your mission and your vision, and some of your planning. So hopefully you're taking those daily 30-day challenges, taking each one, just taking 10 to 15 minutes and just, following what it says, to do. I asked you all at the beginning, you know, um, lean in, right? 30 days. What are you willing to do to improve yourself and improve the school you lead or the team that you're on? Because Lauren and I believe that if you can improve your team or yourself 1% every week, just 1%, by the end of the year, even if you take a 2-week vacation, you're 50% better in all aspects of your team, your school, your organization, or yourself, whatever you're trying to improve. And so I'll take that any day to be 50% better at the end of a calendar year. So again, if you haven't yet, drop in the chat where you're joining us from, your role, if this is your first time with us, awesome. If you have a copy of the book, we're diving into chapters 2 and 3 of uh, of the 10 indicators of high performing charter schools. If you don't have the book, it's okay. You're going to learn a ton and you're going to walk out of here with some great action steps and resources. But highly encourage you to get the book. You can get it on Amazon, the 10 indicators of high performance charter schools. So, hey, Lindsay, great to see you. I saw Christy was with us as well, and David and Fred. Michael, I love. Thank you. Michael was one of those who sent his mission and vision. I think it was off his website, which was awesome, right? And so that's a really cool, great point. Is that just start and grow from where you are, right? Everybody in this call is in different places, so don't worry that it's not where you want it to be. That's okay. Just start and grow from where you are. So let me pull up the PowerPoint. So what we'll do today is we'll spend 35 minutes or so talking about some of the key aspects of the book. We'll use the chat box to communicate, bring some questions back and forth. And then what we'll do is at the end, we'll open up Q&A, and I'll stay in the Q&A as long as anybody wants to hang out and ask questions. We will do that. So, all right. So we're on indicator 2, focusing on the quality work of the school. And what I would first love too, I know Lauren, we had talked about this because I wrote the book, so I'm a little biased. I think the book's pretty good. I was saying to Lauren the other day, I said, "Oh, this is kind of awkward at times. Like, hey, I think this book is good here. Hopefully, other people think too, and are getting value. But what is it? What is something maybe that you read that you really enjoyed, or maybe there was a quote or an aha moment? So as we're going through it, if you're diving in your book or just something you saw, drop it in the chat and let us know because we want to know what resonates with you as well because that's more important. This is your time, and Lauren's going to drop in the link to make sure you have access to all of the resources that come. And if you came with us, even if you didn't buy the book, we wanted to share those resources and templates with you because it's our goal to help you grow to achieve any goal that you desire. Um, so any awareness from session 1, something you realized last week or you've been thinking on, drop that in the chat. Anything that you took action on, drop that in the chat because we want to celebrate you. And anything that from this upcoming, uh, chapters 2 and 3, again, just drop it in there, and I'll make sure we get to it. Um, we'll either talk about it, right, or we'll bring you live if you're willing to also talk about. So just drop anything in there that you love, anything that you did last week, anything that raised your awareness last week. So we good, Lauren? Anything you want to add or anything I missed about some housekeeping that we wanted to do to start today?
No, I will just add, I did go ahead and drop in the chat the book resources. And then if you missed last week on your book study schedule, there's archive to past calls
Mm-hmm.
that we've done. And so don't worry, you're not behind. You can always go back and rewatch any of the past calls that we have done on these indicators. And I'll be sure I drop the book study schedule in the chat as well while we're here together. And the book resources are also there as well. So that's a great page that you can just bookmark or add it to your drive so you have a shortcut and always have access to it.
Yep. And we have the recording of my keynotes on there too, right? The keynote about how to look at the wheel and how to, identify your strategic gaps, right? The risks
Right.
of not evaluating school. Perfect. Yeah. So that's another great, bonus resource you have access to. That was a keynote I did at the North Carolina Association for Charter Schools last year. But you have access to that, and it ties exactly into everything that we do. So Lauren, let's talk about this. So, goals, right? Does the school you lead, teach at, or govern have written down and shared goals? Adopted goals. So, put it a yes in the chat box, or a no, or a sort of, however you want to answer that. Because we've had over 780 people now have taken our 10 indicators assessment. It's actually over 800 people. And only about two-thirds of schools actually have written down goals. And so I ask, what's the impact of your response, right? Yes or no? The impact of having goals versus the impact of not having goals. And Lauren, what are your thoughts around this when we, throw this question out here? We wait for people to put some info in the chat.
Let's say we've already gotten a couple of things in the
Yeah,
chat if you for me to share that.
sure. Yeah, go.
Yeah, Nancy said a goal without a plan, a wish.
That's
Very
right.
powerful. I love the way the book was formatted and written.
Oh, thanks, Nancy. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, she's right. A goal without a plan is a wish. We will talk about that a lot, today, Nancy. Yeah.
Yeah. We've got a couple more. We have well-attended written board and school goals for the first time in some time. They are driving much of the board and ED conversations. That's
Yeah.
from David.
Yeah,
Thanks.
so let's just unpack that, right? So the impact of having a goal gives us commonality, right? We're all talking about the same thing, or we're looking at this is what improvement would be, versus not having them. We're not always sure what we're talking about. And so remember last week we talked about the vision of what is your highest level of awareness of what success would be create your goals, right? Your vision is to maybe 2 years down the road. Sometimes it's 90 days down the road. It all depends, where you're heading. And the goal are the benchmarks, right? To get there. So I love that. What else?
Yeah, Christy shared their goals are more or shared more widely with staff than other stakeholders.
Hmm. Yeah. And that's, critical because you could be a secret agent goal, creator. And I feel like I've been that person before. Like I'll create goals, but I might be not, willing to share them with everybody. I'll share them with like like a group of people. But having your staff on board, by far, Christy, right, is the most important because they're the ones carrying it out. So you need them on board with your goals. And I know when I presented our goals to the Seaside School this year, some of them are some really big, high level goals. And I said, look, uh, it doesn't, it's not critical that these goals are achieved this year, but this is where we know we want to go, right? So sometimes one of the mistakes we make in goals, which I talk about in the book, right, is that we maybe feel we're not worthy of the goal, or we set a goal too low and hit it rather than a goal too high and miss, right? Because we're afraid to miss because we're afraid of the back end, consequences of it. So there's all these really hidden components of goal, but here's the secret, everybody. The secret of a goal is to not to achieve the goal. The secret of the goal is for the person, the team, the organization to grow into uh, being able to achieve that goal on a daily basis. And that's the hard part, right? Goals are set to create growth, but unfortunately, many times goals are set to create a metric and a judgment and an evaluation piece. And it's certainly evaluative, but it should never be like evaluative to the point of, well, you can't achieve this goal, so therefore you can't work here anymore. It could just be, hey, we need to grow. How are we going to get you to grow to be able to be the leader who can take us towards that goal? And Lauren and I love John Maxwell's book, The 21 Laws of Irrefutable Leadership. And the first law, if you've read it, it's the law of the lid. And that's what John says. He's like, your leader, right, is the lid to the success. And if you don't grow your capacity for leadership, ultimately your organization is going to be constantly be hitting its head on you, and it can't get to achieve, that goal. So, critical parts. So, and I would be asking yourself, how come I haven't shared this goal with more? I use my goals to just drive my monthly um, executive director report. And so all the goals are there. Any progress towards the goal is set. So I'm handing my board basically like a monthly report card. Because the last thing we want, which Lauren and I get every April, is boards calling us and saying, hey, how should we be evaluating our executive? I was like, well, don't start now, for Pete's sake. You're going to create a giant fracture. But have they been giving you a monthly board report? What's on that monthly board report? That's kind of like a progress report towards the goal. So great job. Anything else, Lauren?
Sorry, I lost my mouse,
Okay.
couldn't find my unmute button. Yeah, David just shared that he's excited next year they're going to be anchoring their goals off of their vision.
Yeah, I love it. Good. That's great. Great job, David. And I really love just the progress you all have made there at River. I think it's been really, really exciting. So all this is great. So you want to make sure you've got goals in these key areas: academics, finances, operations, organizational health, legal compliance, and really at minimum, driving towards your charter renewal, whatever is the criteria. We got individuals from many different states here. So what's the criteria for renewing your school should be at like the baseline of what that is. And then, you could have goals for uh, leadership, effectiveness, and all sorts of areas. So I know, Lauren, I believe in the drive that has resources, we have this like 2 or 3 pages of possible goal areas and criteria that you could take a look at and adopt to what might fit your school, right? Whether you're high school,
Yeah.
middle school. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're in that drive folder, it's the one that's called potential key
Yep.
performance indicators.
Yeah. So great. And so one of the key reasons to have goals, which I think was the first impact that we talked about, was what gets measured matters. So if I don't have a goal towards academics, I can't measure the success of my academic plan. So therefore, in my mind, I'm almost saying it doesn't matter, which we all know the purpose of school is, student learning. And the main reason why charter schools close at the very end is due to finances. So I should certainly have some goals so I can measure whether or not my financial plan is actually working. So those are just some areas. And Lauren shared. And like I said, only 65% of the respondents actually have adopted and measured goals. And so, it makes it difficult to identify whether you're improving if you don't actually have, written down goals. And I can't remember exactly how much my doctoral program cost. It was probably, 50 or so $1,000. But I think the one thing that I learned and continue to remember is that one goal is a goal, two goals are half a goal, and three goals are no goals at all. So you definitely want to be like mindful of how many goals I have. You could have a goal per, area, or, one, person or one committee in charge of each goal. But I remember working with a school, and they had like 3 or 4 pages of goals, and I was like, who's going to measure this, right? Who's actually paying attention to all these goals? And nobody was, right? So the good intentions was they wrote down goals, but they didn't have the intentional action of actually putting somebody in charge of these goals and constant oversight of them. Right? So there's, in each of the indicators, there are sub indicators. And what Lauren and I really liked seeing is that over 70% of the respondents did note that there is a committed to written down education plan, right? But then when we looked at the data, only 51% noted that the principles and the tenets of the education plan are defined, trained upon, and inspected regularly. So again, okay, we've all answered the first question. Well, not all, 70%. Uh, what are kids going to learn, right? And maybe, maybe how they'll learn it, right? But what's not there is like any sort of real clarity, any sort of definition around that plan, or training to make sure that the teachers actually understand the curriculum, can disseminate the curriculum, or are strong at their instructional methods and practices and strategies to actually um, equip the students. And lastly, is anybody actually paying attention to whether kids are learning, right? So what is the impact of that, right? Why is this the case? Why could we have some commitment to, the question, what will students learn, but not a commitment to, okay, this is what it looks like. Here's your training for it, and here's how we're going to inspect it to make sure that it's working. What do you think are some causes of this common problem? Go ahead, drop them in the chat, and I'll open up, to Lauren. She led a high performing elementary school in Raleigh. What are your thoughts around as we, work with schools and your experiences around this? Uh,
Sure.
yeah, big gap.
Yeah, I would say, number one, just in those early years of a charter school, we all know how it is. You're just
Mm,
trying to like get off the ground and get that momentum going. And someone really, though, needs to be paying attention to, are you doing what you said you were going to do? And I think I shared this example last week as well. But, we wanted to be a STEM school, yet you could not find STEM in the curriculum
mm,
in our elementary school. And so you tell your teachers, we're a STEM school, and you might have a handful that know how to incorporate that into their lessons. You're like, why can't our staff just be more like that? We're all a STEM school. We agreed to this. Um, but then when we really took a look at our education plan and the programs that we were offering, we're like, we haven't set ourselves up for success here. We don't have a STEM curriculum that really aligns to this vision. We don't have electives that are taking our kids down this path naturally. So I know for us, that was, as we grew over the years and we had these aha moments, that was something that stood out to our team.
yeah. And it goes back to what Nancy shared at the beginning, right? A goal without a plan is a wish. So, you fall in love with the goal, right? You marry the mission, you fall in love with the goal, and you may date, the plan. The plan can change, but you need a plan to be able to achieve the actual goal. So I heard you say, hey, good intentions, we're going to be a STEM school, but what we were missing was the intentional action. Hey, who's actually led a STEM school? Or what does STEM look like? Or what are the key components, right? And as you and I, Lauren and I, we just spent a couple hours with my mentor that I've had for 10 years. And we talked to him about this, secret. And I'm going to go like a little bit deeper when we talk about indicator three. But part of answering this question, right, is not having to know all of the answers, right? You don't need to see, as Dr. King said, the whole flight of stairs to get to the top. You just need to see the next step, right? So sometimes, right, leaders get really overwhelmed and say, okay, it's good enough, right? Or, oh gosh, if I say something, they may quit, or there might be like a difficult conversation here. And remember, we talked about the willingness, right? So the awareness of this is what we should be doing, but the willingness to actually take the time to build in all those pieces, define it, train on it, measure it, right? Evaluate it. And as Michael Schmoker said, right, those subtle tweaks, it's on page 43. I mean, you just find those minor things that you can make adjustments to. That's going to get what does he say? Like unleashingly powerful consequences, I think were the terminology. It's just those tiny little things. But what tends to happen is like we may like revamp everything, right? Or try to change it all. And we don't necessarily need to do that, right? So it's a very simple formula. What will the students learn? How will it be taught? How will we assess it, right? And what are we going to do if they do learn it or don't, right? It's a very easy formula to follow. I think I learned that first from, Michael Fullen, but it's just a very simple piece, right? Do we have all those, ducks in a row? So, what do you think the different results are, right? That schools have those commonly owned committed to education plans that the teachers are trained on and given consistent, support and feedback. Like, what do you think the results are of those schools compared to the schools that are, like we kind of let the teachers do what they want, right, within their own guardrails. We don't really have those, definitions versus the schools like, hey, these are our, consistent, principles. This is what we follow. This is what we do every single year. This is how we train our teachers every year. This is how we know the plan is working. Like significant academic results between, the two, because you know what you're going to get when you have clarity. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, everything needs to be scripted out and rigid and everybody has to follow the same thing. Not necessarily true, but there does need to be some sort of guardrails on how we do it. And most education plans, right, in terms of like I'll say like a school's education plan, are really great for 85% of the kids. And then you got to take that other 15% and it needs to be a little bit more personalized, right? But personalized within the guardrails of my key plan. And that's what I found in every high performing school I've ever been to. There has been consistency in that year after year after year. And when I do it year after year, I get better as a teacher compared to if I'm changing the curriculum or I'm changing a program or I'm changing a textbook every 2 or 3 years. I can't get very good at it. It's just really hard. So Lauren, is there any other thoughts in the chat or
Yeah,
anything you want to add to that?
sure. I was just going to add a personal kind of insight. I would say, just from the parent side,
Hmm.
it creates a consistency on what your parents can expect. At my daughter's school, they they have 100% bought into that education model.
Yeah.
And there is so much consistency. I know there's going to be a fact sheet every night for homework that we have to do. There's no guessing. I know because it's been that way since kindergarten. It just there's so much consistency that I think they don't have to educate me every year on what to expect per se as a parent. I know how to support my child at home because I've been doing it since kindergarten.
Yep.
And just because she's moved to fourth grade next year, nothing has changed.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that was one thing. But yeah, we're definitely having some thoughts in the chat that I would like to share. Um, so just kind of going back to one slide before of why do you think, there's this gap between that 70% and
Hmm.
50%. Some of the comments were fear of pushback from stakeholders.
Mm.
Um, this is leadership first and foremost. There needs to be accountability and transparency. Those can be roadblocks for some schools. And there's no alignment with the mission, vision, and goals. And then moving on to what we were just kind of talking about with the difference between the schools. David shared more seamless transition, grade to grade, building up student capabilities across time and teachers. For example, York Elementary talks about how they teach kids how to work together in specific ways in first grade. Then second through fifth grade, they don't need to relearn this skill, and all teachers use the same teamwork.
Yeah. Love all that. And at our school, we've been an A for over 20 years here, the Seaside School, and our middle school has had the same model for year after year after year. And our high school, even though we're 10 years old, we're just starting to kind of like grow and build this foundation. But one of the keys is that we bring in 90 new students in ninth grade. So we're like, oh my gosh, like compared to the eighth graders who transitioned up, right? And it's only because our middle school is a lot smaller, because of the capacity of the facility, we're like, oh my gosh, we got this significant gap. So now we need to build a strategy, right, and execute a strategy to get our ninth graders in alignment with the rest of our ninth graders that came from our base school, right? So all those pieces. But if I don't have those stuff, we're just kind of throwing everybody in there. And when remember when you confuse people, you lose them. So if you don't have, clarity in the academic plan, and Lauren and I, we just read a survey that came from the Carolina Journal. We didn't necessarily love like who took the survey in terms of like, data points because it was older folks who may not be current, school age parents. But the consistency, right, Lauren, was that academic plan, right? It was like I know what it is. I know what my kid's going to teach. It aligns to my values and my, beliefs, and that's what I want. And if you can communicate that, that makes a significant difference. And hopefully that was the action step for the day, right? When you guys woke up and if you saw the email, it said, hey, ask three teachers to tell you what the education plan is. And I'm really curious to see if anybody did it and what the teacher said. So I can't wait for that, feedback.
Hey, Tom, I just want to share one more quick
Mhm.
personal story that goes along with this topic. Something that actually happened just yesterday. And again, going back to that mindset of, I do feel like the school that my daughter is at has a really solid education plan. Everyone's bought into it, parents, students, staff in the building. Um, but we just found out that my daughter is losing her homeroom teacher, who
Mm,
also teaches, um, she teaches her science. So she teaches all the subjects that their kids move around. Um, but I don't have any fear really associated with it because I
mm,
know that whoever they bring in is going to just seamlessly carry on with that education plan. Because again, it has just been so consistent. And yeah, I really have no fear about that. So I think that's just another thing to keep in mind with when you have a clear education plan, it makes that teacher transition process really easy for everyone involved. I'm not going to be worried about, well, what's homework going to look like now with this new teacher, or what's
yeah,
the test going to be like now with this new teacher? Because nothing's changing. I know that.
yeah. And actually, what you just described is trust.
Yep.
That's it, right? And so it's almost because I know your younger daughters also go, will start, and it's like, hey, like I've got a client for life, right? I got a customer for life because I've built trust, because I've built consistency, and they know exactly what's happening. Versus what you described earlier is when, maybe a school's in its like initial, phases, or maybe it's in the middle of, transition, and it just doesn't know, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know what to communicate, and the parents are like, I'm not really sure what's, happening there. And again, when you confuse people, you lose people. So super, super important. Um, at the bottom of page 43, again, don't love to toot my own horn, but I will. Uh, this is where that Michael Schmoker quote is in his book Focus, right? The key to effective leadership is identifying the smallest number of high leverage, easy to understand actions that unleash stunningly powerful consequences. And I said, wow, that statement alone should have you rethinking probably 90% of your day. But here's what I wanted to pull out. As I noted before, the schools that are underperforming typically embrace a large number of low leverage, difficult to understand actions. Okay, so low leverage, difficult to understand actions. Now, what does that mean? This is the best example I have, and it's a common example. It's a common problem. A charter school leader or a school leader, private school leader, doesn't matter, will, love a theory, or they'll go to, visit a school, or they'll read an article. Differentiation comes to mind, Lauren. Differentiation is really, really hard, right? I mean, it has to be the hardest part of a teacher's job is how do I teach multiple levels in my one classroom, right? So I remember I was coaching the leader of this school that had been underperforming. It's now actually closed because of academics, and the whole leadership team was here. And I said, yeah, okay, what's your focus for the year? And they said differentiation. I said, okay, wow. Now, mind you, the school, I think less than 15% of the kids were actually at grade level. I said, okay, all right, differentiation. If that's it, that's it. I said, now, pull out your professional development calendar. How many days, right, are you going to be providing training for teachers? Now, this is pre-work days, right? So we're probably in, end of July or early August. How many days are you going to be training teachers on differentiation? What do you think the answer was, Lauren?
Zero, maybe one.
Yeah, it was zero. They hadn't even like, even though this was their focus for the year, they hadn't even like took the first step to training their teachers how to differentiate. So my next question, okay, well, what is your calendar? Like, what are the open days? And so that was their goal is to sit down during that meeting. I said nothing else should matter until we create this plan, right? And if I could probably go back, I probably should have said, don't do it. Right? You're not ready for that yet. It's too big of a challenge. What you need to go back to is those easy questions. What's the curriculum? How's it going to be taught? How will we assess it? And what will we do if kids do or do not learn it, right? And that was my error in not kind of bringing them back into reality. Instead, I was, kind of a cheerleader for their differentiation, but knowing in the back of my head, there's no way they'll be able to do it. It's too hard. So just be very conscious of what you're asking your teachers to do. Everything you ask them to do, you should have a strategy on how to equip them and teach them how to do it. Okay. Teach them how to do it. So Lauren, you built this beautiful table here for us for the common, crucial, and critical problems. So let's roll through this and we'll get to our action steps for indicator two and take any questions. All right.
Sure. So we just kind of took our two sub indicators from this area and took it through this framework of a common problem going all the way to a critical problem. So the first one is looking at the school-wide goals and performance indicators for student learning are adopted and measured regularly. That's the sub indicator we're looking at. So a common problem might be insufficient focus or clarity on instructional curriculum and programs and methods or quality. So, as we've kind of talked about, no one's really inspecting what's going on in the classroom. That could be a common problem. But if, someone's not paying attention to it, it could turn into a crucial problem. And Tom was just talking about that school, unfortunately, that had really low performing students. So the crucial problem is there's a decline in student performance. And then ultimately the critical problem is consistently low academic performance leads to being on that low performing list. Which, Tom, how long are you allowed to be on that low performing list?
Well, there's some schools that have been on it for over 10 years, sadly. So
Yeah.
there really is there, but they're not supposed to renew more than twice, right? So that would be a 3-year
Right,
charter or a 1-year charter. But either way, just in North Carolina, if we're talking about that,
right.
it caps your ability to grow and like do so many things.
So that low performing list comes with some big
Mhm.
barriers for you as a school, especially in the state of North Carolina. But also in terms of marketing, like no one wants to be marketing themselves as we are a low performing school and on this low performing list. We want to be
Yep.
obviously marketing the opposite of, we are exceeding growth. We are making academic progress. We've been a C school, but now we're a B school, and our goal is to be an A school. Um, so yeah, that's that one example there. Any other thoughts around that top one, Tom?
No, I mean it's pretty much what we hit and what I love everybody in the chat kind of said that, right? If I don't have a goal and I don't have a strategy aligned to the goal, then there's going to be consequences and I have to be aware of those consequences so I can like solve that problem right away and fix it. Yep.
And then the last example we have here is just going back to that education plan and making sure that you're training your staff around it. So a common problem is inadequate professional development. So you've got these high expectations of carrying out this education plan, but you're not really developing your people and training them on that. So that could be your common problem. But from that, it's going to turn into a crucial problem if you don't fix it, when you could have high teacher turnover because you're asking them to do things and evaluating them to do these things that they don't know how to do. And so they're like, I'm not going to stick around and and do this. So you could have high teacher turnover. And it's also hard possibly to recruit because again, teachers
Yeah.
talk. We always say the best way to recruit teachers is through your own network. And so if they're not spreading the good word to come work at your school, it's going to be hard to recruit good teachers. And again, you'll just continue to have that low performance. We see it time and time again. The schools that have that high teacher turnover, it's very hard for them to have a strong education plan because you're constantly having to try to retrain new staff on, the culture of the school, not only just the education plan, but just, how to function in your school.
Yeah. And just, kind of pause there, Lauren, right? If you don't have these things in place, now you've lost potentially a good teacher because you weren't equipping them because they're hungry and they want to go grow and be in a more successful, healthier culture. Now you're, left with who you're able to hire and you don't have a training program for them. And now they're responsible for, 20 to maybe 100 students' academic plans. And you've got no plan for them but high expectations to Lauren's point. It is a recipe for disaster, and eventually, right, it'll turn into that critical problem where the school's going to be underperforming for years. It'll lose funds, right? It'll lose credibility, and eventually, it will close down. Um, and on page 47, Lauren, you just made me think about on that first top, paragraph. Um, everything in your hiring process should revolve around the ability of that, teacher to execute your instructional design or, right, believe in your instructional design. You got to have that, right? So as you recruit, hire, orient, and train teachers, they need to be in tune with the vision of the education plan. And it's either they have the experience in those methods, previously, or they're willing to unlearn, and if we rewrite this book, Lauren, we need to fix the sentence. They're willing to unlearn previous habits. Oh no, it's there, and relearn new skills, right? Unlearn and relearn, and that they crave, feedback, because that's a critical part. So here's the prime example too, which we could, build this into a common, crucial, critical problem. Common is that district focused teachers, right, or district experienced teachers get recruited to a charter school. The charter school doesn't have, or like it has like a special education plan that it wants everybody to follow. But the teacher, right, because they've been doing it one way for so long, it's difficult, right, for them to shift or they want to use a specific, program or whatever. And so now you've got this inconsistency in your school, right? Unless that teacher believes in what you're doing, is willing to unlearn and relearn new skills to be able to execute. And I've seen that a lot. I see it, in my current world. And it's not a bad thing, but it's like, oh, it's an awareness of us as a school. It's like, oh, a couple of the teachers that are having challenges are the teachers that came from districts and they're teaching like a district would. And that's not how we teach, right? So all that's critically important. All those things matter because again, when you confuse someone, you lose them. And Lauren and I have found that people would rather get in trouble than look incompetent, right? I'm always going to fall back into security and safety. I'm always going to fall back into what's comfortable for me. So, I can put myself out there and try this new instructional model, right? Socratic, seminar or project-based learning or whatever. But if it's not going well, I'm going to fall back into what I think and I believe works because that's where I've had the most experience. So
Hey, Tom.
remember, yeah, go ahead,
Oh,
please.
I was just going to say, I just dropped in the chat for everybody. So I know we just talked about kind of those scary, common, crucial, critical problems, but we do have a resource that you can use so that those common problems don't become the critical and crucial problems. And so I just dropped in the chat our education plan
Yep,
playbook. Some of
perfect.
those guiding questions are up at the top that you can sit down with your team and just talk about what we've been saying here. What will our students learn? How will we know they've mastered it?
Yep.
So be sure to check out that resource.
Yeah, and we're using that at our school, Lauren, because one of the things I just realized is that boy, we got a lot of digital software programs. Like, COVID created all these new subscriptions, and so like some of them don't necessarily line up, or we don't need them anymore. But guess what? We're still paying for them. So, last year we started to kind of build this list, and now the teachers are having to show us and prove us like how many kids are logging in and using it and how it's going to take us to our goal. And if they can't prove it to us, we'll hug it, thank it for its time, and then we're going to send it on its way, right? Because a goal without a plan is just a wish. And so we can't just bring everything in there and hope that it works because hope's not a strategy. And you need a strategy that is going to consistently bring you to where you need to be. Um, so, and then Lauren and I were talking. So again, like I've shared about lots of secrets, but we'll be talking about a lot of that in indicator three on page 65. But here's really just kind of what Lauren and I want to say. Every plan works. Every plan works. So it doesn't matter, right? As I talk in a book about, folks say, hey, what's the best plan for educational or like, economically disadvantaged or what's the, you know, that's just a secret. Every plan will work, but you got to be willing to work the plan, right? That means that you have to be able to um, detach yourself from knowing how to do every aspect of the plan. I've just got to do that next step of the plan. What's the next thing for me to learn how to do to be able to do this? And this is how you can start to orient and equip those teachers, right? It's very intentional. Here's what we teach. Right here's the standards in which we pull from, whatever it may be, however you equip your teaching team. And here are those easy questions, right? And as Lauren said, create your own education plan book so they're all clear. Now you have the link to it. Well, ooh, ouch. What will students learn? How will the curriculum be taught? How will we know that they've learned what was taught? And what are we prepared to do when they do not master, the lesson, right? So if they do learn it or they don't master it, what are we going to do, right? So that's, send them into like an intervention. Maybe they come over to the corner for small group and differentiation, right? Maybe we start to give them like a menu of options because if they're maybe one of our advanced kids and we pull in some, gifted type opportunities, whatever it may be, we need every single student needs, to have clarity, and the teacher needs to know the path of what that process is. So, all right. So, how did your school rate? Right. So, if you have a copy of the book or you've taken the assessment, these are the three sub indicators that Lauren and I talked about. You've got school goals in place. You got your education plan written out, and then there's commonality in these questions. So either you agree or you disagreed with these pieces. Okay. And here's the questions for you to reflect on, right? Which of these three sub indicators is a growth opportunity for your organization, right? Where can you improve, one of these areas, and which is potentially a risk, a high level risk if not addressed? Is it not having goals? Is it not having a clear education plan? Right? Or is it not having like a commonly owned education plan that everybody can, follow all the steps to? So if you want to, drop it in the chat, which one? I already showed you the data, right? 70% was indicator one. So 70% have indicator one, right, Lauren? But it was indicator three has the only 50%, I think. I can't remember what the three scores if you've got the type form up. And if you got your wheel, you can break down your wheel and color it in. I was just actually looking at my like original one. I think it's jammed into the back of my book here. But I always love, going back to my original printouts and my wheels of success and how I scored them. So this is just a great way to be able to put your score in. So, all right, make sure you write down your action step for indicator two, right? What's one thing you can do to improve indicator two? Is it writing down goals? Is it working through the education playbook? Is it asking my teachers what they think the education plan is? What is it? And if you're willing to share in the chat box, drop it in there. Lauren, anything in there that we need to address?
Nope, I think we're good to go.
All right, let's do it. So we talked about the quality work of the school, right? So that's the goal and the plan, right? So it's vision, goals, plan. Now we're going to talk about, focusing on the quality work of the student through a data-driven culture, right? So again, you've got access to the free resources that come with the book. And because you came on this webinar live, you've got it right there. Even if you didn't buy the book yet, you're welcome. Hopefully you find value in them. I love that education plan, Lauren, right? I think that's one of like our most commonly, used tools where like a school leader can really sit down and be like, oh my gosh, we got all these things going on. How do we, measure them all? How do we know that they're working? So indicator three really answers the question, the organizational health question, how will we succeed? What daily actions are going to determine our overall academic success, right? And so remember, a strategic leader's job is this: one, define reality. And the assessment helps you do that, right? If everybody in your team takes the 10 indicators assessment, you can ever all, everybody print out your wheel and color your wheel, or we'll make one for you. You can reach out to Lauren, right? But now we have a reality of where we currently are in terms of our mission, our education plan, our employee development plan, right? Our culture. And then the second job of a strategic leader is to cast vision. So I know where I am. I'm standing here, but that's where I'm going, right? We're all going to go to this point, right? Become the highest performing school in our county, right? Or we're going to be a fully accredited, STEM school, all right? Or we're just going to raise our proficiency by, 10, percentiles, whatever. You're just casting vision for the future so everybody's on the same page. You need to influence others, right? Leaders, right? Leaders have to be influencers. Leaders can't manage, right? So the part of that a lot of people get confused about leadership is that it's a title, right? And it's not a title, right? It's the ability to influence others, right? To move them, to build momentum. And then the fourth piece is, develop them, right? So I gotta state this is our current situation. State with right great confidence this is where we're going, vision. I have to be an influential leader so I can move people and motivate people to come with me, and in the meantime identify what their challenges and their gaps might be so I can equip and develop them to be able to be the leaders to carry out that plan. So in indicator three, there's five sub indicators. So we're going to talk about one or two during our talk today. But it really focuses around the instructional leadership team being highly active. Okay. And then is there introductory and ongoing professional development? Do we have an implementation calendar, right? So this means that we have our assessments kind of mapped out. We know when we're going to be addressing certain parts of the academics. Number four is there's ongoing professional development, right? So not only do I start the year with some really great introductory professional development that's more than a half a day, right? There's a continuous plan throughout the year of how I'm going to equip and develop those people. And number five, we build by borrowing. So this means we go see best practices in action. And this is one of the fun things that we do. We're actually doing it Monday in North Carolina at a great charter school called Cornerstone Charter Academy in Greensboro. This is where you bring teachers or your leadership team to a school. You walk through the school, you see best practices in action, you ask the team that's actually doing it questions, right? So you can learn how to do it. Because there's two things that happen when you travel. One is you expand your vision, right? You get to see and expand your vision and begin to believe it, with your own eyes that it's happening, right? Oh, it can happen at the school. And then the second aspect is that you grow. Okay. So you expand your vision and you grow as a person and a professional when you travel. And it doesn't matter where you travel. We're particularly talking about traveling to another school here, right? So these were the five sub indicators, right? So want to hear from you. Was there a particular quote in this section or like something in here you're like, oh, I really like that, or I don't understand that? Go ahead and drop in the chat so we can make sure we address it during our time. Um, but I start this, chapter by talking about Eric Sanchez, and I grabbed this off of their webpage. But you can learn a lot about Henderson Collegiate by going to their webpage. I really love their webpage too, Lauren. It's like it's got a lot of action and it's moving around. It's really, really beautiful. But this is a school that they built. Henderson Collegiate is a K-12. It's one of those 90 schools, right? 90% of the students are free and reduced lunch, minority and academically, that's their achievement level. And when there's a great podcast, if you go to our principal's office podcast, it's one of the first 5 episodes where we interviewed Eric and we talked about, what's the secret? Like, how are you, uh, you know, really doing the impossible here in Vance County? And he went on for like forever. It was like, I don't know, 30 minutes or so. And then he finally said, no, you know what it is? Scratch all that. It's that every single day there's someone on my team whose sole responsibility is to think about what's happening between the 4 walls of every classroom. Now they have equipped their leadership team, right? They have operational people and they have instructional people, right? And the instructional people don't do operational people work, and the operational people don't do instructional people work. And if he, finds them, right, doing multiple jobs, he's like, no, he resets them. That's not your role. We have someone who could do that. I need you to focus on the academic piece, right? So again, that's what's being taught, how it's being taught, how it's being assessed, right? What level are students learning? Every single day. That's their only job. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, I can't, Tom. I have so many responsibilities, or I have a small team or a short team. I hear you. Okay. It might be your current reality, but it's not your truth, right? You can evolve and grow into the leader, right? Or you can hire somebody who can do that work for you. That way, you can focus on what you're great at and they can focus on what they are great at. But somebody's got to be focused and great at, right, Lauren? Overseeing the education plan of your school. It's the purpose of school, right? For students to learn and grow socially, right, and academically, in all areas of their life. Uh, Schools are built to grow them. So common, crucial, and critical problems here in this, chapter. Again, limited use of data to inform instruction. And I remember my first principal job, man, we had data for everything. We had data for IXL and Study Island and Rocket Math. We had this unbelievable data dashboard. And I was just like, which one of these is actually, telling us or informing us on what's working? He's like, I don't know, man, nothing. We weren't sure, so we just kept doing it all. And I was like, okay, right. And so a common problem of not using the data effectively or not understanding how to use the data, right? It turns into a crucial problem when maybe the staff, becomes resistant, right? Or they start to burn out because that's what we found. I was like, hey, I can't have my math teachers, having to learn all these other programs. Can we just pick two? We had to make it easy for them because they were already doing, so much, right? So the staff, resistance to data-driven practices, like that's a crucial problem, and the growing performance, gaps between subgroups if there's no intentional plan about how we're going to close those gaps. And then it turns critical when those performance gaps of subgroups now actually like goes to the whole school, which can easily reduce your grade. And in North Carolina, you can see schools like they either meet growth, exceed growth, or don't meet growth. We have lots of schools that are like maybe a B on the report card that haven't made growth in like 3 or 4 years. And then eventually I say that school's going to be a C school, school soon, or worse, a D, right? And Lauren had said it earlier, it's going to completely start to minimize, the trust and just really break that years and years probably of like, oh, it's the best school around, right? Another common problem is untrained or overwhelmed instructional leaders, right? Maybe they're lacking professional development plans or the funds to actually do it. It becomes a crucial problem when there's no feedback on how to actually develop teachers. So this happens a lot when like a high performing teacher gets promoted into a coaching position, right? So now I've taken my best, teacher out. I'm going to make them a coach because I want them to be able to just multiply themselves. But if I don't train them how to do that, if I don't equip them to be a coach, if they don't have the mindset to be a coach, they're just going to end up doing what they did in the classroom, right? That's just working really hard, but people are going to become frustrated. They'll become frustrated with the coach because they don't know how to actually equip anybody, and the coach is going to be frustrated because no one's buying into what they're trying to tell them to do. Right. So just be very, very conscious, right, of how I am promoting people and how I'm ensuring that if I'm going to put a person in a leadership position, right, or a role as a coach to improve the academic plan, they need to be equipped to know how to do it. And it turns, critical when there's turnover or continued low performance, decreased enrollment, and eventually a closed school. This one's pretty much the same. And Lauren, we had an example here, right? I was looking, we just had a school close in North Carolina that really could fall under this umbrella. But I had looked to see why they actually closed, and it was because they hadn't turned in their audit for 2 years. But they were a low performing academic school for years. But last year, Ridgeview Charter in Gaston County did not receive its charter renewal, and one of the factors was due to low school performance, right? And so this school, I think, didn't even I think it, so 5 years maybe, it was in existence. It was one of those schools that closed pretty quick. So like again, and when they're talking about failing requirements, like that means that they were a D or an F for all of those years over and over and over again. Or right in North Carolina, you have to be within 5 percentiles of what the school system is, and this school was not. Year after year, it was a low academic performing school. And that should not, be the case. If you have an education plan that works and you have individuals that are overseeing it every single day, working to grow the teachers, paying close attention to whether students are learning, making the subtle minor tweaks to improve that, then there's no reason that a school should continue year after year to be a low performing school. And how could this have been prevented? Awareness, right? Awareness is the first step to growth. And then willingness, right? I'm aware that I have a weight problem, right? I'm aware, right? But what am I willing to do to actually like, drop those, 10 pounds, am I, doing my daily core exercises? And the answer is no, everybody, if you're asking. I'll wake up and run at 5 in the morning, but I don't want to do sit-ups. I think they're awful. But anyway, besides the point, it's the same thing for your academic plan, right? Every plan works, but it only works if you're willing to work it every single day. So I'll pause there, Lauren. There might have been a chat. I kind of went on a rant there, but this indicator 3, I think, is a critical, important part of it, right? That really closes that gap between good intentions and intentional action.
Yeah, there's a couple things in the chat. Nancy just shared visiting other great schools is essential. You learn so much and learn their best practices, and that she's seen data overkill and it burns out the staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not only, it could not only burn out staff, it could actually oh, I lost train of thought, but it can create a toxic culture, right? Because then it creates comparison and judgment. It could also do one of two things. It can move somebody who's not in a growth mindset to blame kids for results, right? Or just blame anything else. Or on the other side, it could really attack a self-limiting belief of somebody who's like a good, potential teacher, right? So there's so many components. You got to be really careful with data. And that's like making sure that if you're a data-driven school, which everybody should be, that we talk about data in the right way. We own our data. We know that it's there to inform us. Again, it's our current facts, but it doesn't mean it's our truth, right? It doesn't mean that it's our potential. It's just where we currently are. And I think that's an important part that everybody needs to make sure that you're being very cognizant of is how you present data, how you talk about data, what is the unintended consequences of either too much data or too little data, what it does.
Tom, I was just going to add, I think this is where an instructional leader also has to be willing to be vulnerable.
Mm,
And that's where having your team that completes you really is crucial.
yeah.
I'm just thinking personally, the team that I had, being in elementary school, we were using M class, which is a reading assessment to track your students' progress. And I was a third grade teacher, and at the time we weren't doing M class in third grade. It was really just a kindergarten and first grade. So
Yeah.
now, though I'm found myself in a leadership role where I needed to know this data, and I had to be vulnerable and find someone on the team that could train me, who knew it better than me,
Mm,
and initially needed to be the one leading this other staff in the school in this training, and helping them analyze the data. So I just think it's really important that you can't be scared of not knowing it all, because it's okay. We're human. We're not going to know how to do everything, but having that awareness to then, okay, but I need to find someone on my team who is the expert
yep.
and empower them to then help make us better.
Yeah, I mean, great point. And experts are everywhere, right? They're in books and they're sometimes down the street, whatever it may be. So they don't actually have to be in your building, but someone has to be willing and open, and like you said, have the mindset to learn. Um, so take a moment here. If you haven't assessed your school, right? If we look at sub indicator one, our instructional leadership team is highly active. So do we have teacher leader data analysis meetings on the calendar? So that means whenever my next, my ready test is, right? Or common assessment, or maybe it's my map, like whatever, everybody's using, do I have a date and a time on the calendar where that can actually be sat down and analyzed? Because a good intention is you do the assessment, but the intentional action is actually taking the data down, breaking it down, sitting with teachers, having conversations around it. So maybe it's during their common planning time. Maybe you get a sub for your grade level for the day. I mean, whatever it may be, you could get, four subs if you have them and be like, okay, like, hey, you're the sub for K1 between 8 and 9, so that gives them like an hour, right? You just be strategic in how you want to do it. Right? Is there an introduction, ongoing professional development? So like looking at these pieces, like okay, like right now I'm starting to plan out what next summer looks like. Is there summer conferences that they could go to learn these pieces? What do the in-service days look like? Do you have an implementation calendar so like, hey, there's time for assessment creation, analysis, planning meetings? Like, what does your school calendar look like? Sometimes we just, drop this, calendar and then we try to fill in all these professional developments and it just doesn't go well. It feels rushed. And so just, grow from where you are, think big, but start small. You have ongoing PD, and can you go visit some schools? So if you're part of our North Carolina consortium, we go to three schools a year. But if you're not, or you could go to any school. Just find out a school that maybe has similar mission, vision and values, right? Or maybe they're just doing something that you really like, and go and ask if you can walk the hallways, because that collaboration is really going to up level not just your thinking, but your team's thinking if you bring them with you. So, which one do you need to work on, right? What would high performance look like in indicator three? And what's your action step, right? What's your action step for sub indicator three? I'm sorry, or for indicator three. Go ahead and write it down if you want to share in the chat. Action is going to always be the most important part. So good intentions. I spent an hour so far on this, right? Or maybe you read part of the book, or you took the assessment, but what are you going to apply based upon this session together, right? What changes are you going to make based upon this indicator? What are you going to teach, someone else, right? That's how you're going to grow as a leader. Is application is going to be the key. Just reading a book is not enough. You got to read a book, take action on what you've learned, right? Make the changes where you need to make them. And you'll really, really grow is if you begin to teach other people what you are learning with that. All right. Just looking at the chat here, seeing if I missed anything. Poor Fred had to go cover a class. I hear you, Fred. Visiting other grade school. Perfect. Okay. So this is an opportunity, a Q&A. So what I'll do, you can either raise your hand or I think I can, yep, allow you to unmute yourself. So does anybody have a particular question, or Lauren, was there, something that you thought about that you want to kick off our Q&A time with? Yes, you do. Lawrence got to know.
Now, I
I
was
did.
just going to say, I'm just curious to hear from others,
Yeah.
what do you feel is currently a pain point in any of these sub indicators that you've now thought about after, spending time with Tom and I,
Mhm.
or the opposite? What is something that you are so proud of? You're like, man, we are actually killing it at this sub indicator, and I am proud of us, and I want to share with the group and do a little brag session.
Yeah, we do have some high performing schools here in here. I
We
see, I
do.
see Endeavor. It's been great for a very, very long time. So,
Well, that's a great lead in. I will comment. My leadership team is doing a book study on the book. So this is a, extra dose for me. And we really took first indicator to heart, mission and vision, and have done just a real deep dive into that. To be honest, I'm a little obsessed and I'm having a hard time moving past that one. But we have open house tomorrow. And so we did a walkthrough of our campus, not just, what's dirty and needs to be cleaned, but does the building show what we want it to show? We've always focused on rigorous work, but this time looking at the whole mission, we realized, and y'all have been to my building, it does not scream fine arts focus unless you're walking into one of those fine arts rooms. So we stopped and thought about that. And so we took the opportunity and we've framed all of the plays we've put on for the last 12 or 15 years. We framed them and put them lined a hall with them that leads from the entry toward the auditorium. We had an eighth grader last year who did an independent study art project, and we just hadn't decided what to do with the product, but we found a place again right in our main hall. Spent some time, adding a little bit more to our trophy case, our display cases for artwork. So you walk through the building now and it is noticeable that we value the arts in our school. So thank y'all for that nudge in that direction.
yeah, I think my job's done. I love that. And you also have to have some grace too, right? Because you guys probably feel that more than others, that it can be more, and that's always awesome. I know when we just had the consortium at your school, I just remember seeing lots of art stuff. But that's great because that's what you want, right? How do we evolve? How do we grow it? Are we actually portraying our vision of who we aim to be and other people to see us, to be? There's nothing worse than walking into a school that says it's, STEM or arts, and then it's like impossible to find the evidences of it. So I appreciate you guys taking a look. Yep. Good. That's great. Anybody else?
Hi everyone, I'm Nancy. So I'm currently not a principal anymore. I'm retired, but I'll speak about my last assignment and on chapter one, mission and vision. This was an accelerated high school in North Philadelphia, and we had to get the buy-in from the students because they were adult students. And during orientation, we did activities using our mission, vision, and core values. And then I also had those documents posted in all the classrooms, and we did activities with the teachers as well in the beginning of the school year to get that buy-in. And it helped with the climate and culture of the school as well.
Yeah, and as a strategic leader, Nancy, that's such a key part to be able to build influence, right? And you need buy-in to do that. You need influence, right? You need to find common ground with others and rally people together to get that. And that is difficult. And I think, you know, a leader's job as part of the identifying the current reality is who's with me and who's not. Right. And it doesn't mean that I'm like, oh, well, since you're not with me, you'll never be with me. I need to take that, perspective. Well, tell me more. And I think that's if you take the assessment, right, and everybody fills out their wheel and has a conversation, the goal that Laura and I had was let's create common language. Let's start actually having conversations around this, just like Christy just shared. She's like, I mean, that's a school, you know, Endeavor Charter School is, I don't think it's quite 20 years old, but it's up there. But it's been but for them to sit down and scrutinize, I just love that conversation, and that's how you get buy-in, because the people are not they're not they won't listen if they don't feel heard. So you got to find a way um, to ensure people feel heard. Uh, and one of the coolest things we do, I love it, and we're going to do it on Monday if folks are there. It's the leadership game, and it's a board game basically. But it just talks about leadership principles, and you get people talking about it, and that's when folks open up and they feel safe, and they're like, "Hey, here's how I feel," and that's an important part because then a leader utilizes that information to get better understanding, right? And then lead them, right? So I got to learn before I lead. So I always try to go love, right? If you don't love someone, you're not going to listen to them, right? So love, listen, learn, lead. Love it. Lauren said bye. She had to pick up her daughter. Two things that I wrote down too for me that I need to be thinking about as a leader, a school leader, is you know things are successful when they're done a certain way. And it's your job as the leader or someone's job, right? Whoever you empower to do that, to be able to communicate whatever that certain way is, and to ensure and understand that belief drives behavior. So if I don't believe in that certain way, I ain't doing it, right? I'm going to do it my way. And so that's back to your buy-in point, Nancy, right? I've got to change the beliefs because, I remember working with a school. They were probably, 30% proficient as a group. And we talked about the definition of mastery. What's mastery? And they all were like 80%, 80%, 80%. I said, great, write it down. And I caught this one, teacher, she goes, I want to write it down, but I don't think my kids will ever get there. Right. And I said, well, thank you for your honesty. Um, could they get there one day? She said, of course it is. And great. So put the 80% at the end of your timeline. What's the current reality? And she's like, 28. Perfect. Could they be a 35 in 2 weeks? Yeah. Then write it down, right? So you can have this long lasting goal, but you got to take short, chunks. And the secret is, right, is I'm starting at zero. If I'm stuck at step 5 while I'm standing at 0, I'm never going to get anywhere because I don't need to know step 5. I just need to know step 1. And that's a big part of helping people build their belief in themselves, belief in the kids that they serve, because you as the instructional leader, you're not teaching 1,000 kids. You're spending 60 to 70% of your day, catch this, Lindsay, 60 to 70% of your day equipping adults to lead other adults to lead kids. That's the executive director role. Man, is that hard. Like I gotta wait, I gotta do what? I gotta spend the super majority of my day leading adults, right? Equipping adults to lead other adults who are going to lead kids. And that's where I find a big challenge for me right now is how do I make sure I'm multiplying leadership capacity, growing people who can grow other people, who can grow little people. And that's why the job's hard. It's a super hard job, right? But you just got to start from where you are and get the right people around you to be able to do that. And I just called out Lindsay because I know she's a first year executive director. It's a lot. She was taking on like 90 challenges at one time. Thanks, David. You got a question, Dave? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, quick question, Tom, if it's okay. By the way, Lindsay's doing a great job.
I know
She's not only leading, her team, she's leading the board too a lot of times. So
well,
she's
you know the great part
comfortable in
is,
that.
David. You know the
What's
great part
that?
is. You know the great part is. You and I both knew that she was going to do a great job, maybe before she did. I'm not
Yeah.
100% sure, right? But that's important, right? We all need someone to believe in us to do it,
Yeah.
because sometimes we always don't do that. What's your question, my friend?
Sub indicator three, the sub indicator examples where you saw, there's areas of concern or critical concern, that sort of thing. A lot of it focused on performance. And I find that quickly when the conversation comes up around student work in indicator three, or in your book or in other places, oftentimes it goes to performance. And what that immediately thinks is, well, how are kids doing on tests? Because it's so easy to measure, right? And you get numbers, and that's what the state wants too, right? State of North Carolina, you've got an obligation to them to hit those things. So that's important. But if we also have this parallel goal that maybe isn't the state's, but we're trying to develop students to be critical thinkers.
Yeah.
We want them to be passionate and embracing the content so that they're going to feel fulfilled and be passionate about what they're going to go after and have all the creativity and all the things that STEM is oriented towards, right? In what's the data that you look at there? For
Mhm.
indicator three, you're looking for student quality work. Yeah, you got the EOGs and stuff, fine. We'll look at that. Of course we will. But what are we looking at tied to educational plan and STEM on a regular basis with our teachers?
Yeah, I love that.
Do you have any resources you could
Yeah,
point us to or thoughts?
sure. Yeah, so I think it starts with your vision, right? I talk a lot about the portrait of a graduate. When students leave our school, whether it's fifth grade, eighth grade, or 12th grade, what will they be incredible at? So we, kind of create this avatar. So we want them to be, I heard you say, critical thinkers, great, collaborators,
Yeah.
right? And then it's like, okay, well, what does that look like, right? What would that look like for a 12th grader or an eighth grader, right? And then, so you've got these key pieces. Awesome. Now we know what success looks like. How do we break it down into smaller chunks so what will a student actually have to learn how to do and demonstrate to prove that? So yes, take the EOGs aside, they're just something we have to do. And if you're asking the government to, dictate what success looks like, you'll be chasing rainbows forever, right? So that's just something we have to do. It's a part of who we are. I get it. But what I believe a school should do is really create its own model of what success looks like, and a big part of that. So it could be if what what's it? Efficacy is a huge part. Self efficacy is a huge part of learning. And you could do a pre and a post survey. Hey, when I started this communications class, I was terrified to speak in front of people, right? Or of a scale of 1 to 10, here's my confidence level in X. It's a 4, right, to start. And then at the end of the class or what's it now? Maybe it's a 7, right? So I think you can create your own, measures and metrics around all those pieces. If it's a STEM school, right, then I would go find some other STEM schools. There's actually criteria around, like advanced ed or like, STEM like accreditation or, experiential learning. You could use those pieces. Can our kids do this? I always think it's been really interesting. Like our school, David, we're a dual enrollment high school. So all of our students graduate with 2 years of college credits, and a good percentage of them, graduate with their associate's degree. And that gets them into any Florida State school, no like questions asked, right? So I'm like, okay, what are all these measures, right? Like, okay, we look at grade point average, we look at SAT scores, right? But I'm like, yeah, but durable life skills are really important, right? We hire people for what they know, but they get fired for who they are. So how can we,
Yeah.
so that's what we're working on now. It's like, what is a rubric for durable life skills? What are these types of skills that kids will need? They need to communicate, right? They need to accept feedback. They need to be able to give feedback. They need to, there's all these components. So we're working on that too from a durable life skills piece. So I really think it takes that brain trust of leadership and critical friends and maybe some board members to start to create that portrait of a graduate and then do a backwards design of like what each grade level looks like. Explorers, where my kids went, I felt had a pretty good model. They did portfolios, so year by year, starting in kindergarten, my kids led their kind of quarterly here's and it was always based upon the core values, and they would show us like evidences of work, right? And then in eighth grade they did this like larger one where board members there and members of the community, and they would like bring out work year after year and talk about how they would improve it and what they did. I'm like, oh, what a skill. Like they're self evaluating themselves year after year, and they're able to communicate what they did and how they did it and what they're going to do future. I was like, man, like I know a lot of adults that can't do that, and they're 13, 14 years old kids. So I think to make a long, like that's how I would start to do it. I would think big and start small. What are just a couple of things that you're already doing well? So, get them wrapped up. And then what are some things we want to add on to it? And then what are those other measures? So in that link that Lauren sent, those key performance measures, I believe had a bunch of like academic components. But I think, hey, Lindsay, that's a great question for us also to bring into the inner circle as well. And we could ask, hey, what other ways are you evaluating your, and measuring your, student progress, right? Getting jobs, getting into college, getting into their first choice college. All those are important. Does that help, David?
That's super helpful, Tom. The spark, right? You gave us a spark and got us thinking in non-traditional ways about what we want to be looking for. And I think it's just really important to put those right on the table and say, you got the state stuff, but I'm not buying it, right?
Yeah,
Because you focus on the state stuff, you're focused on outcomes. And I don't want my kid to be full of outcomes. I want my kid to be full of, the
yeah,
journey,
yeah.
the
And
person, the durable skills. So thank you.
yeah, yeah. And if you do all those other things well, the results are going to take care of themselves, right? You're going to be a
Exactly.
school of that's, but most importantly, you're going to be able to distinguish yourself uh, from other schools, right? Which makes you more, marketable and just really impacts, the organization. And it's going to attract you to other outside the box, thinkers. People are going to want to invest in schools that are focusing on those pieces. And right now, right, so our school is focusing on closing the high wage, high need workforce gap we have here in Northwest Florida. Right, so we're focusing on cybersecurity and AI and those durable life skills, right, and those marketing. It's like all those branding pieces, and it's like God, it's way outside the box for us. We don't have a clue how to do it yet, but we're going to do it because we know it's important because it's important to the community and it's important to you got the alpha generation is now in middle school, and then the back end of the Gen Zs here are finishing up high school. Like we got to be looking at generational differences too, as part of our education model. Yeah. I mean, you might have six generations in if you're a K-12 school, odds are you got like six generations of people in your building every day. It's something to be thinking about. Like if you're not differentiating like how you're leading and influencing and communicating based upon all those, then you probably have some differences, going on, right? You've got some challenges. Any other questions? Or not any? What questions do you have, everybody? Great. Thanks, David. I appreciate that. All right. Well, look, here's what I want to make sure you all get a chance to do. You've all like, taken the assessment, right? And if you haven't yet, I would hope that you're open to the consideration of say, hey, Tom, Lauren, can I get 15 or 20 minutes with you about my assessment? Let's, go over it, right? Or my team's assessment, bring your team on. We would love to be able to just help you rethink, some of these pieces. One of the things that I've realized is that, the thinking that caused the problem can't be the level of thought that solves the problem, right? So if, I've got, and I can't remember, the level of thought that created the problem can't be the level of a thinking that solves the problem. I'm not sure if I said it right the first time, but anyway, and it's just really important to just bring in a different perspective. And this is also to, David's question is great. I think the academic excellence committee for your board, if you have one, is by far the most challenging of all the committees. It's the muddiest of all the committees because it really crosses over operations and governance a lot, but it's important that it's clear on their role. So, their role could be to help, define the portrait of a graduate, to really, because I didn't say this, but you made me think, really think about David. If I've got all those parameters in play, this is what we want all kids to be able, the opportunity for them to master when they leave here. It really eliminates the chance of shiny object syndrome. Because if I don't have clarity in what the end result is, any idea will work. And any idea will work, but it may not work towards that goal that you're trying to get to. So the more I can put into play and create this education plan and have these, clear goals, and this is what we want our kids to be able to achieve and grow. And as a result, we need this type of teacher. We need to make sure that our, professional development dollars go to, equipping that teacher. Then it, eliminates, distractions, and it really creates the focus. I think that's really important. So go through the education plan, playbook if you haven't done it. Start to work on that. Happy to sit with anybody and just give our views of your assessment and some action steps that we would recommend you take. All right. All right. Enjoy your weekend. Oh, and Nancy just dropped a great resource from TOSA. Yeah, getting students college and career ready with stackable. Yeah, yeah. I mean, these certs, I'll tell you what. I mean, here's the way I have been explaining it, not only to our kids, but our parents. I said, hey, if you're on LinkedIn, if you're on LinkedIn, you're seeing like, hey, I just earned this certification in, XYZ, and I'm like, hey, moms and dads, this is what your kid's doing in ninth and 10th grade. Like they're earning these professional industry certifications that are going to, separate them from the normal applicant of a lateral entry job, right? Or a professional job. Because remember, our kids are leaving with 2 years of college credit. So they may not want to keep going to a university, but it doesn't matter. If they go into the regular job field, they've got 4 or 5 industry certifications and 2 years of college experience, no matter what. So they're going to get paid more and probably advance more because of those pieces. And yes, the recording will be sent back back through email probably in the next hour or so, whenever I get to it. All right. Thank you for that share, Nancy. That's great. I'm going to tie that back in and make sure that we keep that as well. We'll send it out. All right. Love you all. Enjoy your weekend. Make sure you get some family time. Bye-bye.